in the village of Snow, Benedito, where the sun cracked the earth and the winds carried the smell of leather and dry soil, lived a girl named Rosa, daughter of a humble and honest small farmer named Su Bellarmino, and Donna Iphigenia, a woman of deep faith and hands calloused by work. Rosalina grew up between the singing of birds at dawn and the sound of prayers at dusk. Rosalina was 18 years old when destiny, with its cruel irony, knocked on her door. It was a hot March afternoon, scorching like a live coal, when Colonel Aristides Sporos, the most powerful man in the village, owner of lands, cattle, and, according to the people's gossip, even owner of the shadows, sent an emissary to Su Bellarmino's house. "Colonel Aristides wants to speak with you." "Su Bellarmino, it's a business matter." No one contradicted Colonel Aristides. No one. So Su Bellarmino went, and he returned with a face as white as cotton and eyes as sunken as a dry well. The colonel wanted Rosalina for his son, Seu Raimundo Bajos, the famous Ramundinho, a 25-year-old young man, handsome as the devil himself liked to be, proud as a fighting rooster, and mean as a stormy afternoon. Everyone knew that Ramundinho drank, played cards, and treated the workers with contempt. But he was the colonel's son, and in that land, that was more than enough. So Bellarmino's debt to the colonel was large. A 3-year drought had taken almost everything, and the colonel, with that alligator smile, presented the solution. The debt would be forgiven if Rosalina married Ramundinho. "Father, you cannot accept this," sighed Rosalina, her eyes full of tears, but her voice firm. "My daughter, we have no choice. If I don't pay, he will take our land, and then where will we go? But, father, that man is cruel. Everyone knows it." Rosalina sighed, Donefig, Nia hugging her daughter tightly, added, "True love does not always bloom at the beginning. Sometimes it needs time and a lot of suffering." Rosalina cried that night. She cried until she dried up, and when the tears ended, she did what strong women do when life leaves no choice. She took a deep breath, wiped her face, and decided that, whatever it was, she would stand tall. The wedding was simple, without a party, without flowers. Ramundinho appeared with a wrinkled shirt, smelling of old cachaca, and smiled at the guests as if he had just won a property, because that was exactly how he saw the situation. "You can get used to it, girl. Here, whoever can, commands, and whoever cannot obeys," he said right after the ceremony, without even looking her in the eyes. And so began Rosalina's life in the colonel's big house. The first months were a silent war. Ramundinho barely spoke to her. When he did speak, it was to complain. The food was too salty. The clothes were poorly ironed. The room was too hot. Rosalina listened to everything in silence, with that serenity that confused people because they thought she was submissive. But in truth, she was just waiting. Waiting for what? She herself did not know. But she waited. The house was large, cold on the inside, despite the heat outside. The workers looked at her with a mix of pity and respect, because they saw in her something they could not name, a dignity that would not break, no matter how many humiliations Ramundinho poured on her. "Let him talk, Corral," said Gertrudes, the oldest cook in the house, a plump woman with a generous smile. "A dog that barks a lot, bites little. But it hurts, Gertrudes. Even when it doesn't bite, it hurts. Yes, it hurts, but it doesn't kill. And you are stronger than you seem, my daughter." Ramundinho laughed at her in front of his friends. Called heir, the daughter of the bankrupt farmer. But Rosalina never lowered her head in front of others. She smiled with elegance, answered with intelligence, and when she got home, she cried in the bathroom where no one could see. It was a life split in two, half outside, where she was strong, half inside, where she was human. It was on a July morning, when the village was still asleep, wrapped in the cold of dawn, that everything changed. Ramundinho woke up with a very high fever. the kind of fever that makes the body shake and the head spin like a top. The doctor was called urgently, a thin gentleman named Dr. Afonso, who arrived, examined him, and left the room with a serious face. It's a serious kidney infection. The gentleman will need absolute rest for at least 2 months. No drinking, no effort, and someone needs to be with him all the time. Colonel Aristide, who was old and frail, could barely climb the stairs. Ramandino's brothers, 2 men full of excuses, disappeared in the first 3 days. His friends, the same ones who drank and laughed with him, vanished like smoke when they learned of the illness. No one wanted to stay, and Rosalina stayed. Not because someone ordered her to, not because she was afraid, but because she looked at that man who had humiliated her so much, lying in bed, pale, weak, scared like a child, and something inside her said, "This man is suffering," and she could not ignore anyone's suffering, not even the man who had made her suffer. "Why don't you leave?" he asked one day, his voice hoarse, still with that pride that refused to die. "Because it is my duty," she answered, without taking her eyes off the bowl of broth she was preparing. "Duty," he repeated, as if the word had a bitter taste. "Yes, I am your wife, and a wife takes care of her husband when he is sick. Not because she wants to, sometimes, but because it is the right thing to do." Ramondino fell silent, and for the first time in his entire life, he had no quick answer. The days of isolation were long and strange. The house became theirs alone. Gertrude's came early, left food, and left. The colonel sent messengers, but rarely appeared, and Rosalina and Ramandino spent hours in silence, she caring for him, he watching her. At first, it was difficult. He complained that the medicine was at the wrong time. He complained that the pillow was hot. Once, in anger, he threw the glass of water on the floor and said he didn't want anything else from her. Rosalina picked up the pieces of the glass from the floor, cleaned everything without saying a word, and returned with a new glass. "Why don't you yell at me?" he asked, irritated by her calm. "Because yelling doesn't cure you, and I want you to get better." "Why? I was never good to you." She stopped. She looked at him for a long time, then sighed. "No, you weren't. But that's your problem, not mine. Iam, regardless of how I am treated." Ramandino stared at the ceiling, and for the first time since he was a child, his eyes became moist. As the weeks passed, the silence between them changed. In quality, it stopped being a silence of anger and became a silence of recognition. She brought the medicine. He thanked her. She read aloud because he couldn't read with his head hurting, and he listened with his eyes closed, with a strange expression on his face that no one would call peace, but that was similar to it. One night of fine rain, when the temperature suddenly dropped and Ramandino had a strong tremor, Rosalina stayed awake all night by his side, changing cold compresses on his forehead, praying softly, holding his hand when the tremor returned. In the early morning, when the fever eased a little, he opened his eyes and saw her there, exhausted, her eyes red from lack of sleep, but firm. "You didn't sleep," he said. "No." "Why?" "Because you needed someone to stay." "Silence, Rosalina." "Rosalina." His voice came out, different, lower, more real. "I am a very bad man." "You were," she corrected. "Jen was. I still don't know what you are. But what you were, that can change. If you want," he cried. A man who had not cried since he was 8 years old. He cried like it rains in the Sertao. When the drought ends, suddenly, with force, with everything. And Rosalina said nothing. She just stayed there, firm, like a tree that had learned to resist the wind. In those weeks of isolation, something was born that neither of them had planned, that neither of them had asked for, and that both would take some time to name Loa's born. A true love that did not come from beauty or from a party, but came from shared pain, from silence, that speaks, from care that asks for nothing in return. Ramondino began to talk for real. He told about his tough childhood, about the father who never hugged him, who only taught him that a strong man does not cry and does not weaken. He told about the nights he spent drinking because he didn't know how to deal with the emptiness he carried. He told that pride was an armor he wore because inside he was afraid. Afraid of what? She asked. Of being weak, of not being enough, of someone getting close, seeing who I really am, and leaving. Rosalina took a deep breath. Raimundo. Bah. Raimundo, I have already seen who you really are. Now, here, in this bed, I saw you afraid. I saw you crying. I saw you angry, and I saw you regretting. And I am still here. Why? He asked for the second time. But this time, it was a different question. It was not anger. It was astonishment. Because maybe, she said slowly, as if discovering something while speaking, maybe I am also starting to love you. In the right way, not the way they put me here, but the way that is born when two people truly see each other. Ramondino was sick for 2 months and 3 weeks. When he finally got out of bed, still weak, still slow. The village did not recognize the man who came down the stairs of the big house. He came down slowly, with Rosalina by his side holding his arm, and when he reached the veranda and saw the sunlight for the first time in so long, he stopped, took a deep breath, and stood looking at the sky with the look of someone who had just understood something important. It's beautiful out there, he said. It always was, she replied. You just weren't paying attention. He laughed, a true laugh, without malice, without pride, and Gertrude, who was sweeping the veranda and saw everything, had to hide her emotion by pretending there was dust in her eye. Gertrude's, Ramondino called. Yes, sir. I want to apologize for everything I did to you and to the others here in the house. I was a bad man. I don't want to be like that anymore. Gertrude stopped sweeping. She looked at him. She looked at Rosalina, and she pressed her lips together to hold back something that could be crying or joy or both together, as happens in the moments when life decides to be generous all at once. God is good, sir, was all she said. Ramondino's change was not overnight. It was not an instant miracle. It was work. It was him swallowing his pride when he wanted to fight back. It was him apologizing when he made mistakes, and he still made mistakes, because no one changes in a single moment. It was him going to talk to the workers, one by one, looking them in the eyes. Colonel Aristides, when he saw his son change, was left without understanding anything. He called Ramondino for a conversation. What happened to you, boy? You seemed like another person. I was, but now I'm trying to be who I should have been. And who did this? The old man asked, already knowing the answer. Rosalina, father. She stayed. When everyone left, she stayed. And she stayed not out of fear, not for money. She stayed because she is good, and I needed to get sick to see that. The colonel remained silent for a long time. Then he said, in a voice that had more humility than anyone expected, then take care of her, my son. A woman like that is not found on any corner. On the day Rosalina completed 1 year of marriage, that marriage that had begun without a party and without flowers, Ramondino prepared a surprise. He woke up early. Before her, he went to the garden, cut the most beautiful flowers he could find, simple field flowers, yellow and lilac. He set the veranda table with a white cloth that had belonged to his grandmother. He made the coffee she liked, strong and with cinnamon. And when she came down, still with messy hair and sleepy eyes, she found everything ready. What is this? She asked, standing in the middle of the veranda, looking at the scene as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. It's the wedding you deserve to have from the beginning, he replied, with flowers, with care, with someone who looks at you the way you should be looked at. Rosalina opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. The tears came, but it was a different cry from everything she had cried before. It was a cry that cleansed. That really is that celebrated, I love you, Rosalina. In the wrong way, I didn't know how, but in the right way, I want to learn every day. She went to him. She took his face in both hands. She looked into his eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at her with contempt, and that now looked at her with a tenderness that seemed to have been stored for years, waiting for the right moment to appear. I love you too, Ramando. It took time. It hurt a lot, but it was worth it. Su Bellarmino and Donna Efigenia were invited to lunch at the big house that Sunday. When they arrived and saw Rosalina and Ramondino sitting side by side on the veranda, talking and laughing, Donna Efigenia took her husband's hand and squeezed it tightly. You see, Bellarmino, I told you that true love doesn't always bloom at the beginning. Su Bellarmino blew his nose. He pretended it was a cold, but everyone saw. Gertrude, who served lunch that day, later told the other people in the kitchen that she had never seen that table so cheerful in all the years she had worked in that house, that even the air was different. Lighter, as if the house had finally breathed. Over time, Ramondino and Rosalina became a reference in the village. He, who was once feared, came to be respected. And there is a big difference between the two things. She, who was once an object of pity, came to be admired because the people saw that she had not endured out of weakness, but had stayed by choice. They had children, a girl whom they named Efigenia, in honor of the grandmother, and a boy whom they named Bellarmino in honor of the grandfather. And Ramondino held those children in his lap with a care that his own father had never given him, swearing to himself that he would break that chain of hardness that passed from generation to generation. Colonel Aristides died a few years later, on a quiet afternoon, sitting in the rocking chair on the veranda. And before leaving, he called Ramondino and said, "You gave me a pride I never imagined possible. Not for what you have, for what you have become." Ramondino cried, and this time he did not hide it. How many times in life do we find ourselves facing a situation we did not choose, carrying a weight we did not ask to carry? Rosalina did not choose that marriage. She did not choose that man. She did not choose the pain, but she chose every day, at every difficult dawn, how she would respond to that life. And it was exactly that choice that changed everything. Because true love is not the one that arrives easily, wrapped in flowers and beautiful promises. True love is what is born in the midst of difficulty. It is what appears when someone sees you at your worst moment and decides to stay. It is what grows slowly, like a plant in dry soil, that when it finally blooms, there is no wind that can knock it down. Ramondino was a man broken inside, who learned from an early age that hardness was strength and that opening up was weakness. But the illness, that illness he feared so much, was what saved him, because it was what removed the armor and showed the real man underneath. Scared, needy, capable of love. And Rosalina teaches us that taking care of someone who hurt you is not weakness. It is the greatest form of courage that exists, not because we should endure everything in silence, but because we can choose to be bigger than the pain we received. And that choice can change not just one life, but two. Life sometimes places exactly the wrong person by your side to teach you how to become the right person. And the suffering that seems meaningless is, most of the time, building in you a strength you didn't yet know you needed. Don't give up in the middle of the story. The ending is still being written. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss any stories. Leave your comment below. What did this story mean to you? Which part moved you the most? And tell us, from which city are you watching? Your message may be the one that helps someone who is also in the middle of a difficult story.